My name is James Roberts, and tonight I'm here to talk about the justifiable use of force for my final project as I wrap up my bachelor's degree. Tonight, my wife Liz, my son Sam, and my daughter Alexis are present for the presentation. Law enforcement officers put on a uniform every day and set out to uphold the statutes of their jurisdiction and keep the public safe. It is important that officers have their defense up and be essentially ready for a threat at any time. An ideal interaction between law enforcement and a community member is one that goes safely and smoothly. At times, these situations, when you're dealing with an uncooperative subject, can escalate from 0 to 90 really quick. The mainstream media focuses on the irregular and dramatic events for ratings. Social media pushes its own agenda, and often the public is confused. Law enforcement officers are required to maintain their own safety while deciding what is reasonable amount of use of force while handling a situation. So they maintain the safety of all involved and they have to stop the threat. Officers are trained to recognize dangerous situations, people think and act appropriately. The policies and procedures set forth by the United States Supreme Court and the Constitution dictate every decision a law enforcement officer makes during the lifetime of their career. Officers must know the details of these different Supreme Court cases and dictate what type of power they have over citizens and criminals and what the boundaries and standards are. Tennessee versus Garner, Scott versus Harris. These are both Supreme Court cases involving use of force that establish when a police officer must have probable cause to believe a suspect poses a threat or serious harm to other officers and may use deadly force in the Tennessee versus Garner case. Scott versus Harris references a suspect fleeing from officers in a vehicle and is a potential harm to the public. The court decided the officers have a duty to attempt to terminate a dangerous high-speed chase, in this case, that threatened because the chase threatened the lives of others and innocent bystanders. Graham versus Connor. Again, a state Supreme Court case. Officers are trained to use the force necessary to subdue the subject. Some examples of this would be criminal attempts to swing at an officer with his fist. That would increase the officer's use of force to pepper spray or a taser to help subdue the subject. If a suspect brandishes a weapon of any kind and causes serious bodily harm, aims, swings, lunges in the officer's direction, the officer is justifiable using deadly force to stop the threat of the attacker. The Supreme Court recognized in this case in 1989 that the law enforcement officers use the option of force that is reasonable in any given situation based on the totality of circumstances known to the officer at the time the force was used. When justifying the use of force by an officer, there are many factors that need to be evaluated, and the totality of circumstances is scrutinized. These circumstances typically include the immediate threat to the safety and to the officers and others involved, whether the suspect was actively resisting, the time available for the officer to make decisions, and the circumstances are tense, uncertain, or rapidly evolving. The seriousness of the crime in progress, whether the subject was attempting to evade or escape, and whether the danger the subject posed to the community. This is the use of force matrix. The bottom end, low end would be officer presence, no force needed. Next step would be moderate to limited force. This is where we're talking about physical control with some holds, OC spray, pepper spray. Then next level up is less lethal force. This is where we have your tasers, baton, your axe. Basically, the offender physically is aggressive or assaultive behavior with immediate likelihood of or to self or others. And then your last option there would be deadly force. So a few examples of the types of force that officers experience. So again, at the low end is officer presence. The presence of one or more officers is something that could deteriorate someone from resisting or becoming compliant. Verbal judo, this is big. This is something that the type of communication considered as a gentle yet powerful way persuasion that helps to avoid, resolve, or manage resistance by using presence and words to solve a conflict. And then last is your tactical repositioning. The officer tries to move to a different location to lessen the current level of danger. Situational awareness, knowledge of the understanding of the current situation, which promotes timely, relevant, and accurate assessment of friendly, competitive, and other operations with the battle space in order to facilitate decision making. An information, perspective, and skill that fosters the ability to determine quickly the context and relevance of events that are unfolding. Safety issues to consider. During the process of attempting to de-escalate the situation, officers continually reassess the situation and maintain the safety on the scene. Weaponless hands and techniques. Soft hands. These again are your physical holds, which may include pain compliance controls, which is a weaponless hands-on way to try and gain compliance on the subject. The next step would be hard hands, and this again is a physical hold on the suspect, including taking the time to the ground, or taking the subject to the ground and securing them in handcuffs. Objectively reasonable force. When initial tactics do not work and the subject continues to be violent and fight against the officers, less lethal force tactics must be employed. Taser, your baton, pepper spray. Decisions on what type of force will be enough to stop the threat of violence by any unruly subject must be made in a matter of seconds. While attempting to use the least amount of force necessary, it is not uncommon that the situation escalates so quickly that the officer must transition from the lowest point of use of force to the highest without considering options in between and resort to deadly force. Advanced technology these days include dash cameras, body-worn cameras, audio devices, and tasers. This here is a X26 taser. It's a device that allows police officers an option to use less lethal force than a firearm while still stopping the threat of a dangerous or fleeing suspect. The taser is a conducted energy device that sends electronic impulses through the body, causing neuromuscular incapacitation. This device helps stop a suspect from fighting or fleeing without police using deadly force. Safety of the officers and community. The main goal and core mission of police officers is to control the crime and protect those in the communities that they serve. A significant part of what law enforcement officers do is uphold laws of the state and maintain order. Most police officers have a great moral code and are instilled with principles of honor, integrity, and selflessness, and take their oath of honor as a sincere pledge. Officer safety. Watch the hands. The hand you can't see can kill you. Once the deliberate act is made by an officer to arrest the subject, the officer is justified to defend themselves by using the force to maintain the state's interest in law and order. A common misconception made by officers and the public is that the severity of the crime is relevant when justifying the use of force by an officer against someone who is fighting them. An officer may use force to prevent an attacking suspect from injuring him, no matter what the crime. Mainstream media. The work of police officers, which is enforcing laws, has always been a major source of the news on television and in the movies. Movie plots which most times inaccurate or embellished for the entertainment of the viewers. Research studies show that police officers generally feel that one of the greatest challenges of performing their duties is the way the media portrays law enforcement officers. Negative media. The media portrayal of racism and unnecessary use of force by police is extremely inaccurate and over-exaggerated. Sometimes hostile and biased news and media coverage of law enforcement puts out a heavy strain on police-community relations and threats on both officers and the public safety. Social media. The invention of the internet and social media has allowed danger to follow law enforcement officers home. The advancement of technology allows an upset offender to search, locate, and have access to the officer's personal information, including home addresses, photos of family, putting their officers, their families, and friends at risk, potentially dangerous situations encountering even when off duty. Media and social media. Restrictions on limitations are extremely minimal for social media, and anyone can post anything at any time with little or no fear of consequences. The internet and social media sites allow information to travel faster and farther than ever before, creating a widespread reaction and chaos in the blink of an eye. Public perception. The public's perception of what constitutes police use of force is skewed by the media, movies, and video games. Research has discovered that many Americans have the expectation that law enforcement officers should be able to expertly balance aggression and restraint regardless of the situation. The expectation includes those situations that are potentially life-threatening, as people believe that it is part of the officer's job to put their lives on the line. An unaware public. The public is typically unaware that an officer is expected and trained to engage use force at a level greater than the force being used against them. This includes the use of batons, pepper spray, the taser, to subdue an offender that is determined to fight an officer. The use of force tools are considered reasonable, appropriate, and justifiable use of force by any officer who is sworn to uphold the law and maintain the public safety. Educating the public. One way for citizens to familiarize and become educated on the complexities and realities of what law enforcement officers face day to day is to attend a Citizens Academy or utilize ride-along programs. The conclusion. Law enforcement officers are honorably public servants with high moral character and integrity. Law enforcement officers are highly trained in methods of de-escalating and taking control of unpredictable and violent situations. The use of force continuum validates and justifies the use, the amount, and the type of force that an officer is mandated to use when dealing with the subject. Advanced technology has enhanced the way police officers perform their duties and the tools that they have on hand to assist them in gaining compliance of the suspect. Mainstream media, alongside of the internet and social media sites, have given anti-police activists a medium to spew hate and retaliation against what they perceive as police brutality. In the eye of the public, officers are supposed to be expert marksmen, combat fighters, educators, and caring nurturers. Officers are expected to be able to determine a real gun from a replica in the dark during a potential deadly situation. Officers are supposed to put their human nature and fear aside and make life-altering decisions in a matter of seconds. A final word. Law enforcement officers do not set out to cause harm to anyone, and the use of force is a last resort tactic. However, in order to gain control of an uncooperative subject who is actively resisting or fleeing arrest, to stop the threat of violence against themselves or others, and to bring an unlawful situation safely and effectively under control, police officers are justified in the use of force. Thank you very much. This is my presentation on justifiable use of force.